want to talk to you today about the power of silence. I want to speak to you about the importance of focusing on your own journey and not being distracted by the noise of this world. The world we live in is filled with distractions, social media, opinions, gossip, and criticism. People love to talk. They talk about you. They talk about your past. They talk about your mistakes. But I have come to tell you today, it is time to stop listening to the voices of the world and start listening to the voice of God. The world we live in today is filled with noise, constant chatter, opinions from every direction, and distractions that can pull us away from what truly matters. Everywhere we turn, people have something to say about how we should live, what we should do, and who we should be. The voices of society, social media, friends, family, and even strangers try to shape our identity. But in the midst of all this noise, we often forget the most important voice of all, the voice of God. Many people waste their energy trying to meet the expectations of others, seeking approval, and worrying about opinions that hold no real value. They let criticism discourage them, they let rejection define them, and they let doubt creep into their hearts because they have been too focused on the wrong voices. But the Bible tells us in Lamentations 3:26, it is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. That means we don't need to constantly respond to the world. We need to be still and trust that God is leading us in the right direction. Jesus himself was criticized, mocked, and doubted. The Pharisees constantly tried to trap him with their words. The crowds that once praised him later shouted for his crucifixion. People questioned his authority, his mission, and his identity. But Jesus did not allow their words to distract him from his purpose. He did not waste time defending himself to those who were never going to believe in him anyway. He remained focused, and he stayed silent when necessary. He knew that his purpose was not to win arguments, but to fulfill the will of his Father. So why do we allow the opinions of others to control us? Why do we let negative voices take up space in our minds? The more we listen to the noise of the world, the more we lose sight of who we are in Christ. Instead of looking outward for validation, we must look upward for direction. God has already called you, chosen, redeemed, and loved. You don't need to seek approval from people when you already have the approval of your Creator. When we stop listening to the noise of the world, we gain clarity. We stop second-guessing ourselves. We stop feeling the need to explain every decision. We stop wasting time on things that don't matter and start focusing on what does. Our purpose, our faith, and our growth. There is freedom in silence. When you stop trying to respond to every critic, when you stop worrying about every opinion, and when you stop chasing the approval of others, you will experience peace like never before. You will hear God's voice more clearly, and you will move forward with confidence, knowing that he is leading the way. So today, make a decision. Stop listening to the noise. Start listening to God. And focus on the path he has set before you. The world will always have something to say, but only one voice truly matters. The voice of the one who created you. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. Too many people go through life feeling the need to explain themselves, defend their actions, or justify their choices to others. They feel pressured to meet the expectations of society, friends, family, or even strangers. But the truth is, no matter what you do, there will always be someone who doesn't understand you, doesn't support you, or doesn't believe in you, and that's okay. Your purpose is not to convince people of your worth. Your purpose is to walk in the calling that God has placed on your life. Jesus himself faced constant criticism. The religious leaders doubted him. The people questioned him. And even his own disciples sometimes struggled to fully grasp his mission. Yet Jesus never felt the need to prove himself to anyone. He didn't waste time arguing with those who refused to believe. He didn't try to convince the Pharisees that he was the Son of God. He simply stayed focused on his mission. When they mocked him, he remained silent. When they accused him falsely, he let his actions speak for themselves. His miracles, his love, his sacrifice, these things spoke louder than any words ever could. Many people struggle with self-doubt because they are too focused on what others think of them. They live for the approval of people instead of the approval of God. But Galatians 1:10 says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. When you understand that you don't have to prove yourself to anyone, you will walk in freedom. You will no longer feel the need to explain why you are making certain decisions, why you are growing, why you are changing, or why you are choosing to follow God's plan for your life. People may not understand you. They may not support you. But their understanding is not required for your success. Some of the most powerful moments in life happen in silence. When you stop trying to prove yourself, when you stop chasing validation, and when you simply focus on doing what God has called you to do, the results will speak for themselves. Your growth will be your proof. Your success will be your answer. Your life will be the testimony. Nehemiah was building a wall when his enemies tried to distract him. They called out to him, trying to get him to come down and argue. But Nehemiah responded in Nehemiah 6:03, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. That needs to be your mindset. You are doing a great work in your life. You are growing, changing, and stepping into God's purpose for you. Do not come down to argue with people who don't matter. Stay focused, stay silent, and let your life be the proof of God's hand upon you. Focusing on your own growth is one of the most important things you can do in life. Too many people spend their time looking at what others are doing instead of working on themselves. They compare their journey, their success, and their progress with those around them. But the truth is, comparison is a distraction. It steals your joy, wastes your time, and keeps you from becoming the person God has called you to be. God has a unique plan for your life. He did not create you to follow someone else's path or to live according to someone else's timeline. Galatians 6:04 says, let each one examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in himself alone and not in someone else. In other words, focus on what God is doing in your life. Your journey is different from anyone else's. And when you compare yourself to others, you lose sight of the blessings God has placed before you. One of the biggest traps in life is constantly measuring yourself against others. You see someone who is more successful and you feel like you're falling behind. You see someone who seems to have it all together and you start to doubt yourself. But what you don't realize is that everyone has their own struggles, their own challenges, and their own process. Just because someone else is ahead of you doesn't mean you are behind. Just because someone else's life looks perfect doesn't mean they don't have battles you can't see. The only person you should be competing with is who you were yesterday. Are you growing? Are you becoming wiser? Are you becoming stronger? These are the things that matter. When you focus on your own growth, you will stop worrying about what everyone else is doing, and you will start making real progress in your own life. Look at the story of David. When David was a shepherd boy, his brothers were out fighting in the army. They had the experience, the training, and the approval of men. But while they were focused on status and position, David was focused on growth. He spent time alone, developing his skills, worshiping God, and preparing for what was ahead. He didn't compare himself to his brothers. He didn't try to be like them. He stayed focused on his own journey, and when the time came, he was ready to defeat Goliath. That's what happens when you focus on yourself. God prepares you in ways that others can't see. You may not be where you want to be yet, but if you keep working, keep growing, and keep trusting God, your time will come. Stop looking at others. Stop comparing and stop competing. God is working in your life, and if you stay focused on your growth, you will step into the blessings He has prepared for you. Distractions are one of the enemy's greatest weapons against your purpose. The moment you decide to grow, the moment you choose to focus on your goals, distractions will come. They come in the form of negativity, unnecessary drama, the opinions of others, and even self-doubt. But if you allow these distractions to take your focus, you will never reach the destiny God has planned for you. The enemy doesn't have to destroy you, he just has to distract you. If he can get you to waste your time on meaningless arguments, if he can make you doubt yourself, if he can fill your mind with worry about what others think, then he has already won. That's why you must be intentional about ignoring the things that don't matter. Proverbs 4:25 through 27 says, "Let your eyes look straight ahead, fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil." When Nehemiah was rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem, his enemies tried to stop him. They sent messages trying to get him to come down and argue. They spread lies and tried to make him afraid. But Nehemiah did not let their distractions pull him away from his mission. He responded in Nehemiah 6:03, "I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down." That needs to be your attitude in life. You are doing a great work. You are growing, improving, and stepping into the purpose God has for you. You do not have time for distractions. You do not have time for negative people. You do not have time for useless drama. You cannot come down. Some people will try to pull you into their problems. They will try to get you to fight battles that don't belong to you. They will try to make you prove yourself to them. But you don't need to fight every battle. You don't need to respond to every insult. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. Your time and energy are too valuable to waste on things that don't matter. Look at Jesus. He knew his purpose. He knew his mission, and he refused to be distracted. The Pharisees tried to trap him with words. The people questioned his authority. The crowds misunderstood him. But Jesus never lost focus. He kept his eyes on the mission his Father had given him, and nothing could pull him away from it. You must do the same. Stop getting distracted by what others are doing. Stop worrying about people who don't support you. Stop focusing on what is behind you. Stay locked in on your future. Keep your eyes on your goals. And no matter what comes your way, remind yourself, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. There are times in life when the best thing you can do is stay silent and let God fight your battles. Too often, people feel the need to defend themselves, explain their actions, or prove their worth to others. But the truth is, not every battle is yours to fight. Some battles belong to God. And when you try to handle them on your own, you only exhaust yourself. The Bible tells us in Exodus 14:14, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. This verse was spoken when the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army. Fear surrounded them and they wanted to turn back. But Moses told them to be still because God was about to make a way where there was no way. Many times in life we are tempted to react when people misunderstand us, criticize us, or try to bring us down. Our human nature wants to argue, wants to prove people wrong, and wants to show everyone that we are right. But silence is often more powerful than words. When you stay quiet and trust God, He moves in ways that you never could. Jesus himself gave us the greatest example of this. When he was falsely accused, when he was mocked, when he was brought before Pilate, he remained silent. Matthew 27:14 says, "But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor." He could have defended himself. He could have spoken a word and silenced his accusers. But he chose to remain quiet because he knew his silence was part of God's plan. Some of you are fighting battles that you don't need to fight. You are trying to convince people who will never believe in you. You are trying to gain approval from people who will never support you. But God is saying, be still. Let me handle this. When you stay silent and let God fight for you, He will vindicate you. He will prove your worth. He will silence every voice that rises against you. You don't need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your life, your growth, and your success will be the proof that God is with you. Think about David. Before he became king, he was constantly pursued by Saul. Saul was jealous of him, threatened by him, and wanted to destroy him. But David did not take revenge. He did not try to fight Saul on his own. He trusted God to fight for him, and in the end, God removed Saul and placed David on the throne. When you let God fight your battles, you will walk in peace. You won't be drained by unnecessary conflicts. You won't waste energy on negativity. Instead, you will stand firm in faith, knowing that God is handling everything in His perfect timing. Stay silent, trust Him, and watch Him move. When you focus on your purpose, your critics will seem less significant. One of the most important lessons you can learn is that your purpose is far greater than the opinions or criticism of others. Life is full of people who will try to distract you, discourage you, or make you feel inadequate. They will mock your dreams, question your decisions, and try to convince you to give up. But if you allow their words to define you, you will never reach the destiny God has planned for you. Nehemiah's story in the Bible is a powerful example of this. He was called to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, but his enemies did everything they could to stop him. They mocked him, spread lies, and even tried to trick him into leaving the work to meet with them. But Nehemiah was not swayed. He knew that his purpose was greater than the criticism he faced. In Nehemiah 6:03, he responded to the distraction, saying, "I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down." Nehemiah refused to let the voices of his enemies pull him away from the task God had given him. That same attitude is what you need to have in your life. You are doing a great work. God is working in you, and He has called you to a purpose that only you can fulfill. When you are focused on your purpose, the criticism of others becomes less important. People will talk, they will judge, and they will criticize, but their words do not determine your worth or your destiny. God's calling for your life is greater than any opinion or obstacle. One of the dangers of focusing on your critics is that it can cause you to lose sight of your own calling. If you're constantly looking around at what others are doing or worrying about how others view you, you become distracted. God has a unique plan for you, and comparing yourself to others will only hinder your progress. Remember that your journey is different, and your purpose is not to be like someone else, but to be the person God created you to be. Think about Jesus. He faced relentless criticism from the religious leaders, the crowds, and even his own disciples. They didn't understand his mission, and they doubted his authority, yet he remained focused. He never allowed the opinions of others to derail his purpose. Jesus knew his purpose was greater than any criticism he would face. And because he stayed focused on the mission, he fulfilled the will of God and changed the world forever. In the same way, when you keep your eyes on your purpose, the opinions of others fade into the background. You stop needing validation from people who will never see your true worth. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't understand your calling. And you stop allowing negativity to stop your progress. Today I challenge you to say, like Nehemiah, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Your purpose is worth more than the distractions. Stay focused, keep moving forward, and trust that God will lead you through every challenge. Your critics will fade, but your purpose will remain. And in the end, it is your purpose, not their words, that will define your legacy. There are moments in life when the most powerful response you can give is no response at all. Silence is not weakness, but strength. It is a deliberate choice to focus on the bigger picture and trust that the work you are doing will speak louder than any words could. In a world that thrives on noise, whether it's the constant stream of opinions from others or the pressure to prove yourself, there is incredible power in knowing when to stay silent. One of the most profound examples of the strength found in silence is seen in the life of Jesus Christ. As he stood trial before Pilate, he was accused of many things. The people demanded his crucifixion. But despite all the false accusations and criticism, Jesus remained silent. In Matthew 27:14. We read, but Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. This wasn't a moment of weakness or passivity. It was a powerful display of trust in God's plan. Jesus knew that his mission wasn't to defend himself or argue with those who didn't understand him. His purpose was to fulfill the will of his Father. By staying silent, he allowed God's plan to unfold. And he demonstrated that sometimes God's will is best accomplished not by fighting back, but by trusting him completely. There are times in our lives when we are faced with criticism, misunderstanding, or even outright attacks from others. It's in these moments that we are faced with a choice. We can either respond out of our own strength, defending ourselves, or we can choose to remain silent and allow God to fight our battles. Silence can often speak louder than any words ever could. It is in these moments of silence that God's power becomes evident. When you choose to stay quiet in the face of unjust accusations or attacks, you are placing your trust in God's ability to vindicate you. You are declaring that his judgment matters more than any opinion or perspective that others may have. Many of us struggle with the urge to explain ourselves or justify our actions when others don't understand us. It's a natural desire to want people to know our heart, to want them to see our intentions clearly. But Jesus showed us that we don't need to defend ourselves to every critic. There is strength in remaining silent and letting our actions speak for themselves. The reality is, some people will never understand you, no matter how much you explain yourself. They will misinterpret your intentions, twist your words, or judge you based on their own limited perspective. But God sees your heart. He knows your motives, and he is the one who will bring clarity to the truth. Trusting in his ability to fight for you is an act of faith, one that frees you from the burden of defending yourself. In addition to silence, there's also power in staying focused on your purpose. When you know your mission, when you understand the work God has set before you, nothing can distract you from it. Jesus knew his mission was to bring salvation to the world, and he remained focused on that purpose despite all the distractions around him. He didn't let the crowds distract him, and he didn't let the opinions of the Pharisees pull him off course. He kept his eyes on the prize, and because of his unwavering focus, he was able to accomplish his purpose. The same is true for us. When we are focused on the calling God has placed on our lives, distractions become less significant. People will try to pull us away from our purpose. They will try to get us to argue, to fight, to prove ourselves. But when we remain focused on what God has called us to do, we can ignore those distractions and continue to move forward. Your purpose is greater than any distraction, and when you stay focused on it, the distractions will lose their power. But this focus also requires patience. Too often we want immediate results. We want people to understand us right away. We want to see the fruits of our labor without delay. But God's timing is perfect, and sometimes the greatest growth comes in seasons of waiting. It is in those moments of silence and focus that God is preparing us for something greater. Your silence does not mean inactivity. It means you are allowing God to work behind the scenes, even when you can't see it. At the same time, there is something incredibly freeing about not having to explain yourself to others. When we stop trying to justify every decision, every move, we are freeing ourselves from the opinions of the world. The more you seek validation from others, the more you give them power over your peace. But when you focus on your purpose and stay silent in the face of criticism, you take that power back. God's approval is the only one that matters. There's a certain peace that comes from staying focused on your purpose and not letting distractions get in the way. You can live your life knowing that God has a plan for you and that he is working in you even when you can't see it. Silence becomes a tool of trust, allowing you to rest in God's sovereignty and trust that he is working things out for your good. As the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. When you focus on that truth, distractions lose their power and silence becomes a powerful act of faith. When you focus on your purpose and trust that God is at work, you begin to experience a peace that surpasses understanding. You stop worrying about what others think of you, and you stop feeling the need to explain yourself. You know that your life is in God's hands, and that's all that matters. The opinions of others fade into the background, and you are free to walk in the calling God has placed on your life with confidence and peace. Staying silent and focusing on your purpose are acts of surrender. You're surrendering your need for control, your need for validation, and your need to prove yourself. You are trusting that God will fight your battles, that he will defend you, and that he will bring his purposes to pass in your life. And in that surrender, you find true freedom. Freedom to be who God has called you to be. Free from the weight of other people's opinions, and free to focus on the mission that he has set before you.